God is holy. But what does that really mean? Holy. Exalted or worthy of complete devotion as one perfect in goodness and righteousness. So, when I say that God is holy, I am saying that he is worthy of complete devotion because he is perfect in goodness and righteousness. Welcome to the Unhidden Gospel, a deep dive into the biblical gospel. God is either holy or not holy, right? He is either perfect or corrupted/corruptible. God is either holy or there is no real moral standard whatsoever. To say that God is not holy is to say that things like rape and murder are, in truth, okay, that there is nothing truly wrong with them. Bear with me for a bit of a roundabout explanation. Something that I have noticed and been intrigued by for as long as I can remember is the fact that you can't really force anyone to do anything, and so sometimes force has to be used. Let me explain what I mean. The majority of society abides by the majority of our laws. Most of us don't kill people or rob banks. We all know that if we do, we will probably get caught and go to jail. But still, some people do murder, and when caught and convicted, they go to prison. But how do we get them into prison? If the criminal doesn't want to go to prison, they can refuse and run from the cops. Maybe they'll make it to a foreign country. At the end of the day, how is it that, as a society, we punish and imprison people who will not submit to our justice system? They must be physically overpowered. Police officers, armed with weapons and handcuffs, track the person down and subdue them, capture them against their will. They can go kicking and screaming all the way and be completely mentally unwilling to submit and go to prison. The only way we can serve justice is to physically force them into prison, right? Every single thing that is done in the universe is either by willing submission/participation or physical force. You can't force people, so you have to force them. Why do wars even have to happen? Because when verbal tactics fail to convince people to change their ways or their mind willingly, then physical force is the only possibility left to accomplish that goal that you are trying to accomplish that you deem important enough to go to war for. When Hitler began his campaign, there was no changing his mind, and that's why the world had to physically resist and fight back in the war, even though it resulted in many tragic deaths. The American Revolution was fought because we didn't want to submit to the tyranny of the king, and so the only way to accomplish the goal of removing ourselves from him was to physically fight back. So what's the point? What's the moral of these stories? The point is that the one who is the most physically able is the one who wins. The one who is able to physically overpower the other is the one who gets to set the rules. The country with the most capable military is the one that wins the war and is able to establish whatever it is that they were fighting to establish. The most physically capable wrestler is the one that wins through combinations of strength and skill, and the government that has the force of police or military behind them is the one that sets the rules and the laws that we all abide by. Okay, so here we've got a couple of guys. They bought a little island for fun because they're rich. We've got Kyle and Preston. Kyle and Preston want to create their own country and government and all that on this island. Right now, they're trying to decide the rules of the island, which they've dubbed Preston Kyland. They set some ground rules that they agree on, like some basics, no killing, no stealing, as well as some other practical safety rules, like everyone who comes must be able to swim. They continue to come up with rules. Eventually, they come to a disagreement. Kyle wants to make a rule where everyone must wear pink on Wednesdays, but Preston thinks that's absurd. He thinks pink should be worn on Fridays, and Wednesdays should be reserved for orange. How can they resolve this issue? Eventually, one must either submit to the other willingly, or they must resort to physical force. Even if they agree to let rock, paper, scissors determine who gets to set that rule, they are still willingly submitting upon their loss. If neither will willingly submit, then one must physically overpower the other. Whether that means to kill them, or perhaps just tie them to a tree, that is the only other option. And which one do you think would win? Preston may never submit, but if Kyle ties him to a tree, what position is he in to assert his desires over Kyle's? He's not, right? What can he do about it? The bigger fish wins. In this sense, God is the biggest fish there could be. He is the highest possible power. It is from his power that everything in existence has come from. If the one who sets the rules is the one with the power to physically subdue everybody else, how could anybody but God set the rules? Some people think of Satan as the enemy of God in the sense that they're equals, like who's gonna win, God or the devil, but there could be no contest. Satan is a created being, and so No matter how powerful he may be, God can snap his fingers and render him powerless and useless. And one day he will. God sets the rules, and it doesn't matter who likes it. We go kicking and screaming against God's commandments, against his standards, but that doesn't change anything. It is God that sets the objective standard of morality for all of mankind. Now, of course, many people like to deny God's existence, the topic of another video of mine, or they like to accuse God himself of being immoral. What they don't realize is that if they assert God to be immoral, unholy, they are really saying that things like rape and murder are not objectively wrong, and by their own logic could even be considered good things. What if instead of what color to wear on what day, Kyle and Preston were fighting about if murder was okay? If Kyle thought murder was fine and he bested Preston, then, well, he could just kill Preston, and with Preston just, out of the picture, who is there to say that Kyle is wrong and that murder is objectively wrong? Kyle gets to set the rules on the island, so until somebody comes along to, overthrow Kyle physically, his rule goes, and he says murder is okay. By what standard could he be wrong? The only standard on that island is himself, and he says murder is okay. Unless, of course, he's subject to a standard of morality higher than himself, like God's, there is no objective standard of goodness, just his own ideas. There's nothing but himself by which to gauge holiness. Understanding God's holiness and his law is what gives me confidence to be able to say that murder is wrong, even if Kyle has me strapped to a tree. Without God's standard, I have no authority behind my assertion that murder is wrong. I'm the one strapped to a tree. What can I do? What does my word mean? If God sets the standard for goodness, then God himself must also be perfectly good. If God is the one setting the standard, then whatever he does is good. So if God says lying is wrong one day, but then the next day he goes and defies his own standard and lies, then he has now changed what good actually is, and lying is now good even though it wasn't yesterday. That would mean that morality is pliable and changing, inconsistent, unreliable. If God can change and defy his own standards, then the standards themselves can change. So rape might be objectively wrong one day, but then if God is not holy and he can change, then the next day it might not be objectively wrong. That would be pretty terrifying, wouldn't it, for morality to just be subjective like that, to be able to change with the wind. If we don't have objective morality, what do we have to cling to as humans? We might as well just each do what we each please, and if somebody doesn't like it, we hope that we can outdo them and be the bigger fish. We hope that we can have the biggest gun or the biggest brain to be able to physically overpower them in one way or another, so that we can continue to live in our own sense of morality instead of being subject to theirs. After all, Hitler believed what he was doing was good, and so without the authority of God to appeal to, who are you and I to say anything different, except that, we won the physical war. So we should be very, very thankful indeed that God is holy and unchanging. Thank you so much for watching, but as always, test my words, read your Bibles, and spread the truth.